Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Salon Products 101 webinar. We'll give folks a couple of minutes to join on the call, but for those that are here, we have enabled the chat so that you're able to introduce yourselves. So if you feel so called to share your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, we'll be using the chat throughout the webinar for discussion questions, regular question and answer, all of that jazz. So feel free to go ahead and introduce yourselves while we get started and wait for everyone to join. I see some people calling in from Wyoming, New York, Georgia. For the new folks coming in, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'll go ahead and kind of get started. We have a lot to cover in the next hour, and so happy that you all have joined us today. Welcome to those who are new to Weave and or Women's Voices for the Earth. And we'll just go ahead and dive in. So today we're going to be having our Salon Products 101 webinar. Our 101 series is a series that we do at the intersect of a couple of different topics, and those are all aligned with the programmatic priorities of the organization. So we have had one-on-ones on menstrual health equity and intimate care products. We have a cleaning products one coming up in the new year, and this one is specifically for salon products. So assuming that you're joining, this is a topic that is of interest to you. But if any of those other topic areas sound interesting, we do have those as well. And this is just so that we can have a ground to run from, right? So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Weave or Women's Voices for the Earth, and this is your first time joining us, I can tell you a little bit about our organization. So Women's Voices of the Earth aims to drive towards a future free from products that have toxic impacts. And so a lot of our work is rooted in gender justice, alongside historically and presently ignored environmental health harms. And we do this by leveraging solidarity in our approach and use our expertise in research, advocacy, and organizing. So that's a little bit about who we are as an organization. We are based out of Denver, Colorado, and we do like to do a land acknowledgement. I'm specifically calling in from Oakland, California. I'm based in Ohlone land, and we have staff that is all across the country. So as you can also see in the chat, if you would like to do your land acknowledgement as well, we welcome that. So before I get too deep in the weeds, let me introduce myself. My name is Jayla Burton. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Programs here at Women's Voices for the Earth, and I'll pass it to my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Alexander Scranton. I'm the Director of Science and Research here at Women's Voices of the Earth, and same pronouns, she, her. Yep. Glad to be here. Glad to see everyone here. Terrific.
Yeah. Awesome. And so the course objectives of this webinar today is really to create a welcoming, inclusive, and accessible space for our community to learn more and engage in conversations around safer salon practices. And so we would like to culture an environment here today that is judgment-free. There's no shame. We're coming here to learn, share information, to ask questions, and then offer opportunities to take action in your own personal lives and like in the grand scheme of everything as well. And so those are the goals of today. And we appreciate you all being here. Some of our community agreements that we like to foster within our organization is being present, listen with an open mind, lean into discomfort, take space, make space, respect, inclusivity, collective knowledge and power, and then holding what's confidential. So these are all of the things of like we would like to culture in this environment here today. If there's any other community agreements that you all would like to see, feel free to drop them in the chat as well, and we will make sure to incorporate and honor those also. So, as I said in the introduction of our course objectives, we are going to be incorporating some discussion questions as well. And for this, I would love for you all to utilize the chat. But before we dive into the meat of our Salon Products 101 webinar, I want everyone to kind of take a moment and reflect on what products do you think of when you hear the term salon products? And go ahead, enter that in the chat, and I'll try to read them off as I see them come in. Some Judith says hair care. We also have shampoo and conditioner, hair dye, hair and skincare. That's spot on. I know a recent one that came across for me was like eyelash extensions. I was talking with someone about this the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, I go to my salon to get eyelash extensions." Like, oh wow, I don't know if we've covered that yet, but still, yeah, that's one as well. Nail polish, awesome. Keep them coming um, as they come to you. And if anything comes up throughout this conversation, like I said, feel free to put them in the chat. But when we talk about the beauty industry here at Women's Voices for the Earth, we are kind of using that as an umbrella term to include products such as hair products, nail products, cosmetics, and personal care products. In a historical context, altering appearances is one that has been a part of human culture for a millennia, for whatever reason, for societal reasons, for fashion reasons, whether that's cultural reasons as well. And so we all have different ways of going about this, right? And the beauty industry is kind of what helps us go about this, right? So the beauty industry spans from both professional services and direct consumer products. Here today, we're going to be primarily focusing on professional services in salon products and in salon spaces. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're coming into this conversation. And I just wanted to lay the groundwork for that. In addition, one of the things that I think is really important as we talk about this topic is if we can say it together in the terms of TikTok world, right? We listen and we don't judge, right? And so everything that we'll be talking about today is we're coming in from a perspective of we want everyone to choose what they do and have the right to opt into whatever beauty practices that they choose that makes them feel comfortable, that makes them feel empowered. We are not in the judge game. We are not in that kind of arena in any way, shape, or form. I think the purpose of us sharing this information is so that we can make healthier choices if we so want to, right? And so we know those options. In addition, we want to recognize that salon professionals are valued and honored. They provide very important services to the community. And we would love to get to a point where the salon industry is protecting those that are providing those services even better. And then also understanding, product safety and concerns, understanding what some of the health harms are, and so that we can hold corporations and our systems accountable to nurture an industry that is a little bit safer. So those are some of the ways that we're coming into this work as we're not in a shame game. We just want folks to have the information so that we can all best make the decisions that are for us. And there's no guilt to this at all. A framework of which I operate from as working in the environmental health space for some time is shifting responsibility from individuals to systems. And so with that being said, let's talk a little bit about this beauty industry that I mentioned before, right? So the beauty industry is a $50 billion industry that has gone largely self-regulated. So there are the federal laws governing cosmetics specifically is over like 70 years old and does have some loopholes. As a result, it makes it kind of hard for the FDA to assess authority over the cosmetics ingredients before they reach the market. And when we're looking at this from a global perspective, the European Union has banned over 1,000 chemicals in personal care products due to the health implications, including cancer, reproductive harms, and other health concerns as well, while the US is vastly behind, right? So when we look at um, the beauty industry and their accountability, we could do better. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how that manifests in the work that we're doing here at Weave and the work that you all can do as individuals as well to hold the beauty industry accountable too. So when we're talking about who is impacted, let's just talk for a second of what specific demographics and groups that are affected by the beauty industry. We do have a lot of research and evidence when it comes to specifically information about Black women and how we opt in to personal care products. And so collectively, there's an estimated $5.7 billion a year spent on beauty products within the Black community. And these products and services on average, Black women go to the salon about twice a month. And so wanting to put that out there because we do have a lot of research and evidence in that sphere. I also want to say a disclaimer as although we're coming into this like from an inclusive standpoint, we're just talking based on what we have data for. And so identifying where there might be some limitations or where we further need to make some research or explorations. So in addition to consumers who are impacted, also salon workers as well. Salon workers are disproportionately exposed to toxic chemicals in the professional salon space, including formaldehyde. And then Alex will go over a deeper dive of what are some of the other chemicals of concern. But many professional products that are used in these spaces, salon workers are exposed to them every single day. And so that daily and cumulative exposure poses an even larger risk for them, right? In addition, there are many communities that reside deep within the margins that are working as salon workers. So whether that is low-income women, women of color, immigrant women, or just folks in general. And so within these groups, there's also compounding health risks because of other things. And so there leads to higher risk of like asthma, pregnancy complications, skin conditions, and cancers in comparison to other workers in different occupations. And so that is why there is an urgency and an immediate need to take action to ensure that professional salon products are safe for not only salon workers, but consumers so that we can prevent these health risks. So laying the context for that, I'm going to spark up our next discussion question / reflection. Hearing all of this, and we'll dive into a little bit more, but are there any salon procedures, treatments that you're currently concerned about or that you're wondering if they affect your health? And I'll just give everyone a moment. And like I said, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I know one that we've done and we've worked on. Yep. Carla got it right on the nail on the head. That we've done a lot of work on here at Women's Voices of the Earth for the Earth is perms, Brazilian blowouts, keratin treatments, chemical hair straightening, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So glad that you all are kind of even in the know. Yep, hair relaxers, especially used with heat. Perfect. Great. Well, with all of that being said and all of that taken into consideration, I'm going to pass it on to Alex and she'll do a deeper dive of what are some of the chemicals specifically of concern. And yeah, take it away, Alex.
Okay, thanks, Jayla. Go to the next slide. And yeah, I totally appreciate everything coming in on the chat. It's really helpful to learn what people, are thinking about and what they're concerned about. And they're definitely in line with a lot of the things that we're working on. So just to create a little context today, I want you guys to think about the kind of things that we're trying to do to alter our experiences when we go to the salon. So these are kind of, the basic goals of hair and nails. With your hair, you might be going to change the color of your hair, involving hair dye or hair bleach. Maybe you want to change the texture of your hair. If it's curly, you want it straight. If it's straight, you want it curly. You can change the look and shine of your hair with various oils or conditioners, or even just change how much hair you have. You can cut hair, you can add hair with extensions, with wigs, with hair pieces. With nails, it's often, largely about color. If we can color our nails, we need good nail polish that will stay and last on our nails through washing and use of our hands. But sometimes you need to, remove the color that was there before. With synthetic nails, you're actually adding nails on top of your nails. And so, of all these kind of salon goals, and there are more, but these are kind of some of the basic ones. The only relatively simple chemical-free option is cutting your hair. Like, this is scissors, trimmers. It's very, very straightforward. The rest of these tasks take some fairly complicated chemistry. If you think about it, like, your hair, if it's straight, does not want to curl on its own. It needs stuff to make that happen. Same if it's curly, it doesn't want to go straight. It doesn't want to change color by itself. But there are things that we have been able to do. With your nails, if you want, nails are kind of designed for stuff to wash off, right? And not adhere. So we need polish that will adhere to your nails and that will stay when you use it. So nail polish is not just simple paint. It's, especially designed for nails. And of course, artificial nails, or when you're adding nails, or if you're adding hair and extensions and wigs, sometimes they're pretty serious adhesive chemicals that are involved, so that these things stay where you want them to stay. So simpler Elmer's glue is not going to cut it. We need different chemistry, and there's been a lot of chemistry innovations in the beauty industry over the years that have been pretty amazing and creative, often borrowing from other industries. One thing people don't often know is that nail polish and auto paint kind of came from the same place, right? They were used to be made of the very same chemicals, because again, it's applying a color to a hard surface and making sure that that color stays, right? But unfortunately, much of the salon product innovation that's been done has really focused on that function, right? What do we want this product to do? And without focusing a lot on how are these chemicals going to affect our health when we're applying them to our bodies. So as it turns out, a lot of industrial chemicals have been involved. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So yes, unfortunately, beauty chemistry often involves harmful industrial chemicals. And obviously this came up a lot in the chat, what folks are concerned about with hair relaxers. Formaldehyde, this is one of the best examples. Formaldehyde is very, very strong stuff. It's been incorporated at high concentrations into these hair straighteners. Why? Because of its function. Like, the chemistry works, especially with a high heat of a flat iron. You can straighten curly hair and it'll last for, potentially a couple months. But the question that didn't get asked when companies were formulating these hair straightening products was, is this a good idea for our health to include this ingredient? And when you look at it from that perspective, the answer is absolutely not. This example is one of those that's really just so clear. While formaldehyde does straighten hair, it gases off with heat. So you need the heat to really do that straightening function, but that is making it worse, making it much more easy to inhale. Formaldehyde is a very strong irritant, meaning it is affecting your lungs, right? When you breathe it in, very, very harsh. It is a carcinogen, which means it causes cancer, right? It is a neurotoxin, meaning it is terrible for your brain, right? And numerous studies are now showing that when salon workers are using these products in the salon on their clients, that they have exceedingly high exposures in the salon to like industrial level exposures to formaldehyde. And not surprisingly, we sort of discovered this because salon workers started complaining about the health impacts that they were having just even immediately from doing these services. Sometimes clients were also complaining of health effects. So really, in this case, we know better, right? We know we should have as little intentional exposure of formaldehyde as we can. We should be using safer chemicals to straighten hair. We can do better. And we really should have been asking these questions about health before these products ever went on the market. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so as a result of kind of these, borrowing chemicals from other industries, salons end up being they can be fairly chemically intensive workplaces. And this is something that we don't often think about in terms of salons. We think of salons as small businesses. They're relatively innocuous. There's relatively little regulation, as Jayla told us earlier, when it comes to what can or can't be used in a salon. You don't see federal hazardous material requirements, right? Hazardous material and safety training. This doesn't happen for salons like it does in other industrial workplaces that use a lot of chemicals. But we don't realize till we look at the data how similar or how much salon work has in common with these other workplaces. So these are two examples from studies that I found, which really demonstrate this point, where there are some industries that we think of as being fairly chemically hazardous. We're not that surprised that, although it's wrong, we're not that surprised that workers' health is getting harmed. And most people don't associate salon work in that same category. So the first study was from sort of a meta study, 11 studies on found a significantly increased risk of multiple myeloma. This is a kind of blood cancer. And this was found of the occupations they looked at. It was firefighters, employees exposed to engine exhaust, and hairdressers, all having this considerably increased risk. We're not surprised that firefighters are inhaling all kinds of things in their work. Employees exposed to engine exhaust all day. This is a very serious, chemically intensive workplace. Hairdressers are right up there in that risk, with that risk level, which is not something we associate with this work. The other study looked at idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. This is an often fatal lung disease that's associated with breathing in a lot of dust and other particulates. So the high-risk occupations, stone cutting and polishing, working with metal dust, farming, and then hairdressing, again, along in there, equally as risky as these other occupations. So this data shows us, that there's something very wrong with this picture for an occupation that should not be so harmful, or that we don't think about as harmful, is coming from exposures to these products that we have today. But we can do something else about it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So if I haven't already freaked you out with that last kind of scary slide, the question you may be asking yourself is, should I be worried about these chemical exposures in the salon? We've talked a little bit about salon workers from a client perspective. We don't have a lot of data, unfortunately. It's really hard to answer that question. Is it harmful to be in a salon? It really depends on the salon and depends on what's being done. But I think there are some good questions that we can ask ourselves in the salon. So questions like, are there fumes in the air that are causing me some immediate symptoms? Like, are you getting a symptom like a headache or a cough? Are you having, difficulty breathing, some sort of respiratory irritation? Are your eyes watering, from the fumes? More so with salon workers who have a little bit more hands-on exposure to salon products, are you getting rashes? Do you have dry or broken skin as a result of working with these products? These seem like short-term, relatively mild symptoms, but these little symptoms could actually be indicators of longer-term health effects. And we don't have enough data looking at enough of what the long-term health effects are, particularly for clients. But these are indications, these short-term symptoms are indications of a longer term problem. And you may notice you go into some salons and there are very little or no fumes in the air. Now, this is probably a good sign. It's likely they're using safer products that aren't gassing off chemicals. They may have better ventilation that is getting the chemical, intensive air out and bringing fresh air in. Ventilation is really, really important in a salon. Right now, anyway, it can reduce harm significantly. It can really clean the air and reduce exposures. But over the long term, it's not the end all solution, right? We need to aim for a beauty industry that provides products that don't need extensive ventilation to be used safely. We need to be able to use products indoors in a salon in a way that doesn't cause harm. And of course, when we're thinking about chemical exposures in the salon, we have to think of the cumulative impacts. Often in a salon, you are exposed to more than one chemical at once. You're exposed to more than one product at once. Sometimes you're getting a service done. The person in the chair next to you is getting a different service done. You're breathing the same air. And of course, for salon workers or even people who are frequenting salons a lot, there's a lifetime of exposures of being in the salon. So we can't just settle for, standards of like, well, this product isn't going to kill you if you use it once. We have to have safe products we can use over and over again for a lifetime that don't have these. So let's go to the next slide. We'll get into some specifics. All right, so these chemicals in this slide, this comes from a report that we did a couple of years ago called Exposed Ingredients in Salon Products and Salon Worker Health and Safety. And what we did was we surveyed common professional salon products that are sold in professional salon beauty stores, looked at their ingredients, and we really focused on some categories of products that salon workers had told us they were mostly concerned about for their health. So in this case, with hair salon products, we looked at hair dyes and hair bleaches. And these are some of the chemicals. I'm not going to go into the details of each one, but these are the chemicals that really stood out to us when we looked at those ingredient lists as being unnecessarily harsh. These are chemicals we really want to move away from. Certainly, a lot of them are skin sensitizers and allergens. Skin sensitization and skin allergies are big reasons that salon workers are leaving their jobs because the allergies get too intense. And there are very, very strong sensitizers that we don't need to be using anymore. There are some chemicals in here that are genotoxic, meaning they're affecting your genes that can potentially lead to cancer. There are lung irritants, chemicals causing asthma. There's some evidence of reproductive harm from some of these chemicals. Now, the tricky thing is some of these, there's some good, it's a good list of chemicals here of chemicals to avoid. Some of them are really hard to avoid. Looking at the hair bleaches, so many of them contain these persulfate chemicals, which we know salon workers' lung health is considerably impacted by unintentionally breathing in these bleach powders. And they can cause chemical burns and things like that. But there aren't too many bleaches that don't have these ingredients today. So this is where we need innovation. But some of these products you can find alternatives, different kinds of hair dyes that don't have these chemicals. So this is a good list. And I think we're going to put in the it's in the chat. If you want, you don't have to write all these down from this slide. There is a fact sheet that's online which has all of these chemicals. And then if you want to see the whole report, that is in the chat as well. So let's go to the next slide. These were the chemicals that we looked at again from the same report from nail salon products. Again, acrylic nails and gel nails seem to come to the top of the list of having numerous chemicals that we were really concerned about. There was the one dimethyltoluamine, which is straight up very clear carcinogen, unnecessary. You don't need this in the products, and not every acrylic or gel nail has it, but certainly one we need to be moving away from. The methyl acrylates, harder to find gel nails that don't have those, but they are skin sensitizers and potentially bad for your lungs as well. There are some of these gel nails that had methyl ethyl ketone, causing reproductive harm. This is a chemical you don't want to be exposed to if you're pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant. But again, we don't think about that being a concern in a nail salon. But these are chemicals that we can be avoiding, and which we need the industry to move away from. All right, let's go to the next slide. And then I wanted to do sort of a shout out in general for fragrance. This is a ingredient. Of course, it really reflects a lot of chemicals, but it's an ingredient. It is so common in salon products, and there's a tremendous amount of exposure to salon workers. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of these kind of industrial chemicals that are included in salon products for their function. Some of these industrial chemicals have this industrial odor to them. And so when they're in products, they often get covered up with a whole lot of fragrance, so that it smells like flowers and it doesn't smell like you're, in a engine shop or something. But the thing with fragrance is it'll often just say fragrance on the label, but fragrance can be up to 100 different chemicals. Most of these are not derived from flowers anymore. They're mostly synthetically created from petrochemicals. Some fragrance ingredients can be very harmful. There are carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals like styrene and methyl-eugenol. There are reproductive toxins, again, ones you don't want to be exposed to if you are pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant, things like phthalates and lilial. There are chemicals in there affecting your brain, these neurotoxicants like xylenes and phenol, and of course, a whole host of skin allergies. Fragrance is one of the top skin allergens across the board in any population. And I've just got this, quote. There was one study that looked at hairdressers and beauticians, and they had a 47-fold higher risk of having fragrance skin allergies than people in other occupations. And this is, when you see studies like this, like, it's just off the charts. We don't see 47-fold higher risks of anything, hardly ever. It's just so high up there. This study did not specifically look at nail salon workers, and I haven't seen an equivalent study to look at that, but certainly there's a lot of fragrance and nail products as well that you might not expect. And a lot of the studies looking at these allergies, hairdressers and beauticians, they are developing these allergies often in the first year on the job, like in beauty school during their training. They are developing these allergies that they didn't have before they started working with these products. So it is a real concern, and again, very hard to find fragrance-free salon products in a lot of places, but something that we need to be moving towards and moving towards safer fragrance. Now, there isn't a lot of research out there. Like, we know there are, for example, carcinogens. We know there are reproductive toxins. I've never seen a study, a cancer study, where they're asking patients how much fragrance they've been exposed to. I mean, this is just not something that people are looking at, even though these carcinogens are part of that exposure. Similarly, with reproductive toxins, there are no fertility studies asking people what kind of fragrance they've been exposed to. But there are studies. We know fragrance can exacerbate asthma, COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It can trigger that. Migraines and headaches from fragrance are very real, and certainly all the skin sensitization and reactions. So, we can do better. We need to be very careful about fragrance exposures, making fragrance safer, and then reducing some of these, exceptional exposures to fragrance for salon workers. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so overall, looking at salon workers and health in the salon, I think, like I said before, there's very little data on salon clients and what happens to people who frequent salons. Again, it's not a question that gets asked in a lot of studies. There are, a handful of studies. There's a, sort of a recent study linking some more use of hair straighteners, even at home or in the salon, with potential for risk for uterine cancer. There's some risk of hair dye and bladder cancer, but again, not a lot of published data on the people who are going to salons as a client. What we know about hazards in the salon is the impact on salon workers, where there is a fair amount of research looking at these disproportionate health impacts that salon workers experience. We know they experience these disproportionate exposures. And when you look at the data, we see that they're experiencing all kinds of health effects at higher risk as well. So to go through these, and this is largely from a report we did a number of years ago called Beauty and Its Beast. And so that link is also in the chat. So all the citations for what I'm talking about are in there. I didn't have room on the slide to put down the citations for all the many studies, but skin conditions, as I mentioned, the high rates of allergies, rashes and dermatitis, often off the charts, again, with salon workers. Respiratory conditions, likely due to what they're breathing in, affecting their lungs. One study found a 3-fold increased risk of exacerbated asthma on the job. So asthma getting worse because of the work that salon workers are doing. And then they've even measured decreased lung function when, not being able to take as deep breath, right, as a salon worker. There are a handful of studies on reproductive disorders and birth defects that are really concerning. Having babies born with low birth weight, higher risk of miscarriage, having babies born with cleft palates are all higher risks for salon workers than other occupations. There's a number of different cancers, and more studies are coming out on this as we learn more, but we know that lung, larynx, bladder cancer, and then the multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, are all more severe risks for salon workers. And then there's, chemicals affecting our brains as well, leading to higher rates of depression, higher rates eventually of people dying from Alzheimer's disease and dementia in salon workers compared to others. So it's not surprising to see some of these when we realize what the chemicals in these products that people are exposed to. You breathe in enough kind of harsh lung irritants, lung disease is not a stretch, but there's also not a lot of research saying these salon workers use this product containing this chemical and they got this disease. That kind of research we almost never have. But it's not a stretch to figure out that the exposures are leading to these impacts that we're seeing overall. And again, this isn't right. Salon workers should not be paying with their health for their careers. We really need the manufacturers of professional salon products to do better, to provide us with better products so that we don't see these kind of impacts in the future. Okay, this is sort of my slightly more hopeful slide. I'm hoping not to leave everyone too depressed with a lot of the data I just loaded up, because I know it can look grim when whenever I do talks on salon products. Sometimes it comes across as looking grim, and I want to make sure that I'm not leaving the impression here that getting your hair or nails done is a bad idea, or that working in a salon is a bad choice for your health. This is not something that Weave believes at all. Salon work is actually a career that's a really wonderful thing. It's a really amazing industry. The industry has created incredible opportunities for so many people, specifically, especially for women, for immigrant communities, for low-income folks. There are jobs in which people can innovate. They can run their own businesses. They can use creativity in their work. Salons often function to create develop connections and community. The salons can support good feelings, positive self-images. It creates beauty, right? Going to a salon makes a lot of people feel great, and we need more of that in this world. So I don't want to give anyone the impression that, we think this industry is wrong. We just need to inspire a real transformation of this industry. We need to ask for better products from manufacturers. Salon workers need to use their very powerful voices and demand higher standards for what they get to work with. I mean, if this is the beauty industry is about it's about beauty, we need to make it beautiful, right? And this can be done. There are ways of changing products, of thinking more carefully about the chemicals that we use. And we do have some hard work to do. We have to sort of get past this. This is what we've always done. These are the chemicals we've always used, and they work. But no, that's not enough. They also have to work and they have to be healthy, right? We are well overdue for innovation in the salon product industry, and that's really what we're asking for. And that's why we do webinars just like this, because Women's Voices for the Earth cannot do this work alone. But with all of you and all of your voices and your interests, this is something that can in fact be accomplished, for better outcomes, both for people going to the salon and as well as people who work there. So I think that's my last slide. Finish up there and hand it back to Jayla.
Thank you, Alex. And kind of going off of this theme of like do more than worry, right? And panic, like let's like turn all of this information into like how we can manifest that into action. So I'm just gonna kind of close us out with some recommendations for salon workers specifically, and then also clients if it's relevant as well. But I think the main thing is making sure to read what's on the ingredient list if there is a capacity to do that. I think that is very important to look out for harmful chemicals, including formaldehyde, phthalates, parabens, so that you at least know what is being used, right? If there's an opportunity to limit exposure, opt into that as well. So if possible, to reduce any harmful products or limit the frequency of services that involve or revolve around toxic chemicals. If that's not an option, wearing PPE, so personal protective equipment, such as gloves, N95 mask, which should all be provided by salon owners. And so knowing that right to be able to ask for that and advocate for yourselves. And also increasing ventilation. So I know Alex talked a little bit about, how ventilation can be an intervention towards reducing exposure to chemicals that might, harm like inhalation risk. So those are a couple of things that you could do. In addition, and this is where kind of what we do as an organization as well, is we ask manufacturers and companies the hard questions and kind of hold them accountable. And if that's something that is within capacity to do, there's 1-800 numbers that you can call, sending emails to CEOs, executives, just even questioning and pressing them about what are some of the chemicals in their products, to let them know that our voices matter and that we are watching, instead of just like complying with whatever they decide to put out in the world. And then in addition, sharing this information with either colleagues, or if you're a client, with your stylist, and letting them know that resources that are like housed within Weave and other similar organizations exist. So those are a few recommendations. I wanted to also give a little bit of an update about where things are with formaldehyde in hair straightening products in terms of like on a regulation level. So just to provide a little bit of background, I think it was back in like 2010 where there were the initial kind of reports of health harms for salon workers in a direct association with formaldehyde in hair straighteners. So on a global level, like I think a lot of other countries like Canada, European Union, took a little bit more swift action on products that had formaldehyde in them. And it's taken a little bit longer here, like in the States, to be able to do that. But there's definitely been a lot of work and organizing to get us to that point. So in 2011, the Environmental Working Group filed an initial citizens petition asking for the FDA to review the safety of formaldehyde in hair straighteners. And there was a little bit of a failure to respond from the agency level. And then in 2016, science actually within the FDA. So scientists at the FDA did determine that formaldehyde was unsafe, and they began to take steps to potentially banning the chemicals, but it was a very slow moving process. So also in 2016, Women's Voices for the Earth and EWG joined together and filed a lawsuit against FDA for failing to act on formaldehyde risks, just because, as you can see, from 2010 to 2016, that's 6 years of, like, not a lot of movement, right? Unfortunately, the lawsuit was dismissed, but I think that this was really and still remains to be like a really big area that groups are working on. And we've kind of started to attack it from like a state by state level as well. And so you see, in fast forward from 2016 to 2020, California actually passed a bill, AB 2762, that banned formaldehyde in hair straighteners, and in addition to there's other toxic chemicals that were involved in that bill as well. And that implementation is set to happen in 2025. In addition, after California passed their bill, Maryland followed suit and passed a similar bill in 2021, and theirs also is set for implementation in 2025 as well. In 2021, Weave and EWG submitted a second citizens petition urging the FDA to ban formaldehyde in hair straighteners, and kind of still similar thing, dragging of the feet, not really much movement happening in that regard. And then there was word that there was supposed to be a proposed ban in April 2024. So fast forward to this year, we were expected to have something in April that got pushed back to July, that got pushed back to October. We're now in December and still waiting, but definitely, like, for example, Women's Voices of the Earth has been following up with the FDA and trying to keep the finger on the pulse of, like, hey, we're not going to let up on this. Where is it now? And so in this year, we invited the FDA to a national meeting. Unfortunately, they declined to attend, but did say that they were committed to this issue as one that is important. So as we move into 2025, we will see the formaldehyde bans take effect in California and in Maryland. And also, this is one of the going to be Weave's priorities for coming into the new year as well. And so if this is something that interests you, make sure that you stay in the loop by being signed up for our email list, where we often send out email e-blasts that have different ways to take action and all of that. But just wanted to give everyone kind of an update of where we are with formaldehyde in hair straightening products today, and a little bit of the history of how, where it's been, where we are now. So yes, that's a little bit of where we are. I think in the meantime, it's really important to have this voice and continue to advocate for better practices, so that both manufacturers and companies know that this is something that is important to us, and also are the folks that are creating the regulations for manufacturers and companies as well. So with that being said, I think that closes out our portion of information and knowledge exchange, and wanted to open up the floor for any questions and answers. And if you have any, I feel you can go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as best we can.
Okay, looks like I see a question in here. And the question is, how do you anticipate hair products will respond to the California and Maryland formaldehyde bans? One product nationally that is safer. I'm not sure what that second part of the question is, but this is a really good question. We are very eager to see what will happen. We know, I see, or state specific products. I see. Thank you for clarification. That's great. It'll be really interesting to see what happens, because it's been such a long history, as Jayla was telling us, of formaldehyde in these products. And there are certainly plenty of brands that have taken formaldehyde out over the years. We're still looking at trying to figure out who's still got formaldehyde in there. Brazilian Blowout is kind of one of they were, the main focus initially. As far as I've seen their most recent stuff, it still has formaldehyde in there. And there hasn't been, these companies generally did not respond or even lobby on these state bills. So we're not sure what they're planning. Officially, they should be banned. There's not a ton of enforcement language in either the California or the Maryland laws, so it'll be interesting to see how exactly they are enforced when those go into effect. But we'll be watching it very closely. We don't expect that companies usually, sell their products nationally and don't, create a specific product just for California or just for Maryland. We haven't seen that with other state bans in the past, so unlikely that they would do that. But the question is whether or not these products will just rapidly come off the market, particularly in those states, or whether they will, push the envelope and see whether or not they will be enforced off the market. So we just don't know at this point what's going to happen, but it's a very good question. Certainly the state bans add some pressure towards getting these banned nationally. So oh, really good question. What about the use of PFAS chemicals in hair care products? Thanks for this question. This is and PFAS are these perfluorinated chemicals. They're called the sort of forever chemicals that have been getting a fair amount of press, linked to a whole host of health impacts, and they are in so many different products out there, not just things like hair care products. We have seen again some bans at the state level on PFAS in cosmetics, but there hasn't been a lot of research into it. There is, I believe, some intentional use. When we did our study looking at ingredients in some professional salon products, we didn't find any of the, we looked at, I think, over 150 products. We didn't find any that had PFAS on the label. So we couldn't specifically, address where we were seeing it. There's also the chance that a lot of these products can be contaminated with PFAS, which is kind of a whole other ballgame. There's a lot of PFAS contamination in our world, really, really hard to control. But there's probably, there is some intentional use as well. I know there's some states, I think it's Vermont or Maine, where they're requiring and probably in California, requiring manufacturers to disclose that they're using PFAS in their products. So that information, I think, will also help. But again, there's very little research on, exactly what our exposure is from hair care products in particular. But it's definitely a concern. Like I said, we didn't find it on the labels of professional hair salon products that we looked at, but for sure it's out there and is another source. But these state bans are happening. So again, it'll be interesting to see how they're enforced and how products are improved over time. Right. Yeah, I saw it in the chat, people talking about PFAS being found in dairy products, which is true. This is part of the contamination. Part of the contamination of our world is significant. Any other questions? The Q&A. I know we had a question that came in with the registration, so I'll answer that. And it was looking specifically on impacts to the health of Black women or women in salons where kind of Black hair is done. And this has been an increased area of focus, which is great because for a long time when we looked at the research on salon workers, a lot of the work that's in our Beauty and Its Beast report largely ignored the whole world of Black hair salons, where there are very different products, there are different services being offered, and different ingredients in those products depending on the functions. So for a long time we were complaining like this is a real data gap where we don't know what's happening, and that is still true. I don't think there's still a lot of research on looking at the health impacts directly, but what we're starting to see are studies looking at what are the levels of various, harmful chemicals like volatile organic chemicals. What are these VOC levels in the salons which largely have a Black clientele, and we're definitely seeing higher levels of VOCs in these salons. And that's a concern. There's a disproportionate exposure there. And then they've also looked at levels of chemicals in the bodies of salon workers as well, and what they're kind of absorbing into their bodies from their work. And again, we're seeing higher levels in these places where they're serving Black clientele. There was at least one hopeful study showing lower levels in the bodies of the salon workers who are doing more natural hair services rather than traditional. So there are different ways to do hair. There are different processes that we can use, and safer products as well. But again, it's an emerging area of research that we're really excited about, and we hope to know more. But it's definitely, for a long time, it's really been a data gap, looking at these specific areas of and communities and their exposures, which can be really different depending on what you're doing, to your hair particularly. Yep. Any other questions? You see any others, Jayla? I don't know if I've missed any in the chat.
See any others? But definitely, if there are others that come up, after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to Alex or myself. We'd be happy to answer any questions. I think this is really good conversation to have, and so grateful for everyone sharing other resources in the chat, and just, other tidbits of knowledge that I think contributes to the cumulative understanding of what's going on in the salon industry, and where other folks are doing this work from as well. So thank you, everyone. I'm just going to close this out by saying we would love to hear your feedback in terms of how this information resonated with you, how it was delivered, all of that. And so we will be sending out a webinar evaluation that you could find in our chat. It'll be posted shortly. And for those of you that do fill out the raffle, you will be entered into a raffle to receive a prize from Intersense, one of our business partners, that is valued at $200. So we did link a link to Intersense website. They do focus on providing organic and healthy products for all folks. And if you do fill out the evaluation, you might get a little taste of what they have to offer there. So we really appreciate everyone for joining in today. And please let us know if there's any other questions that you have. We will be sending out and sharing the recording to this webinar as well. But thank you everyone for attending, and we really appreciate you all sharing space with us, and have a good end of year and new year.